Welcome to the Justin Strawn Podcast. I'm glad to be back with you, recording in a new year. Good to be with you guys. We are discussing today, if you're a Mississippi State fan, we are discussing the Duke's Mayo Bowl. It will take place tonight, so looking forward to it. We got a lot to talk about with that. We also have some Mississippi State basketball stuff to discuss. And the only other thing I'm going to be talking about today will be the Stranger Things finale. So if you are here for certain parts of the show, but not others, you can take a look. If you're listening to it on the recorded podcast, you can take a look at the timestamps and catch all that. If you're here on TikTok Live, thank you for joining me. Appreciate you guys coming by and stopping by and saying hi. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the like and subscribe button. Those do help me out a lot. If you're listening on a podcast catcher, please hit subscribe there as well. Also, if you're on Apple, if you could rate and review, that helps as well. So like I said, all those things do a lot to help me. So if you enjoy listening to the show, which I hope some of you do, then it would help me out a lot if you could do all those things. I'm on all of the social media platforms. I'm obviously on TikTok, since I'm recording live on TikTok. I am on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all those things. So you can just look me up and find me there. Now, let's get into the heart of the show. Mississippi State takes on the Wake Forest Demon Deacons later on tonight in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Takes place at 7 o'clock. Unexpected bowl. Once Mississippi State kind of got to the point where they couldn't win any of those games that they probably should have won against Texas, Tennessee, or who was the other one? Florida. And they looked really doubtful that they were going to end up going to win more than 5 games this year. It looked really bad for State in terms of making it to a bowl, but because of their APR score and because of teams opting out of their bowls, Mississippi State is playing in the Duke's Mayo Bowl tonight against Wake Forest. I don't know a whole lot about Wake Forest. I'm not going to sit there and try to tell you a whole lot about them. I know their coach, Jay Dickert, was very successful at Washington State, and obviously with Washington State Washington State being left in the Pac-12 with just Oregon State after the Big Ten and the Big 12 basically raided their conference and picked everybody off. Jay Dickert got to a better situation. Now, Wake Forest is not obviously a power team. They're not one of the teams that you think of as as one of the better teams in college football. Pretty much you can say the same thing about Mississippi State, but they obviously had a pretty good year this year. They were 8-4. Robbie Ashford, I think, is their quarterback, who was at Auburn for a little while and wasn't very good, but he's been very good there. Now, Mississippi State, despite the fact they are 5-7, despite the fact that Wake Forest is 8-4, Mississippi State is coming into this game as a 3-point favorite. And look, all that has to do with is supposed talent on the roster. Mississippi State has always been much higher in the recruiting rankings than Wake Forest. Wake Forest is normally in the 50s and 60s. Mississippi State is typically in the high 20s, the low 30s. And that's the reason why Mississippi State is the favorite tonight, is because they on paper should have a much better roster in terms of talent. Now, can they get something out of that roster? I don't know. That's the challenge, I think, for Mississippi State coming into this game. I think that's really what Jeff Levy needs to be focusing on tonight when they are playing, is getting the people like me, the people who are not completely on board with Jeff Levy as the head coach, getting people like me to get a little bit more on board. Look, I'm not, even if Mississippi State comes out, unless they just come out and wax Wake Forest 63-0, I'm not going to take a ton in terms of saying that this team can go, 9-3 or 10-2 or something like that next year. But if they have a really good game, they could, it could raise my opinion and my expectation for what we get next year. Look, you got to win at least 7 games if you're Jeff Levy next year. I don't think winning 6 will cut it. I think you got to win at least 7, and that's going to be difficult. That means you need to win all 3 of your non-conference games, and you do have to go on the road to Minnesota. And look, Minnesota's not great, but they're not bad either. I mean, they're very much in that same kind of caliber as Mississippi State is. So, but then you have to find at least 4 wins in SEC play and go at least 4-5 in SEC play. And that's not going to be easy. I mean, it's never going to be easy because of the fact that you play in a very, very difficult conference. You have a really difficult time. You don't have a really difficult time getting to those wins simply because the SEC is loaded every single year, and that's not going to change. It's going to always be the case that The SEC will have tons of good teams. So you're going to have to find a way to find 4 wins. And if Mississippi State can go out tonight with Kamario Taylor against a team that is not playing in the college football playoff semifinal and have a really good game and show that what he's capable of, you can provide some help. Look, here's the thing. If the college football playoff ends up expanding to 16 teams, you basically have to be one of the top 15 teams because you're always going to have a group of 5 team that's going to be in the playoff. Could Mississippi State be a top 15 team at some point, maybe even next year? Yeah, I mean, that's not asking too much. And it's really not. I mean, top 15, you probably have to be 9-3. And if you can make it to 9-3, you're in the conversation. Now, there's probably going to be other 9-3 teams as well, and that'll be in the conversation. So it just depends on who you beat, where you beat them, how bad that you beat them. And that's one of the things that I know some people say, oh, let's just go back to the BCS and just do 2 teams and 1 championship. No, that doesn't provide anybody any hope. And expanding the playoff does make it a little bit playoff or bust. And look, I'm fine with that. I mean, but if you're one of these teams like Mississippi State and you're a fan of Mississippi State, you're ecstatic to play in the bowl game tonight because you didn't kind of if you're one of those teams that are supposed to be, maybe a 6-7 win team, maybe a 5-6 win team, getting to a bowl is still really fun and still you can still get a lot of enjoyment out of it just because it's an extra game that you weren't expecting. So there is still plenty of reason for the other bowls to exist. But yeah, it makes the playoff more accessible. And look, as we have seen, the top teams currently in the college football playoff don't do very well. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But Mississippi State can go and provide some hope for their fan base in the Mayo Bowl tonight. Will they actually do it? I don't know. But that's the thing that you actually can do. You can go and provide some hope going forward into 2026. Now, a couple of things I want to see. I want to see what this defense does without Coleman Hutzler as the defensive coordinator. I do want to see what this defense looks like without him. Look, I know Zach Arnett is not going to be calling the plays. I don't know who's going to be doing that, but I want to see what they can do without him organizing this defense. Obviously, I don't know what they've done in practice leading up to the Mayo Bowl. I'm sure Zach Arnett has been doing a lot of coaching and a lot of evaluating, but I don't know that he's actually taken over as defensive coordinator just yet at this point. But I'm very interested to see what the defense looks like. So that's one of the things that I want to see. Is the stink of Coleman Hutzler gone? And if it is, how much better can the defense look without him running the show on the defensive side of the football? I want to see what Kamario Taylor can do. I want to see if he can go up against a team that isn't nearly as talented as Ole Miss and isn't nearly as talented as really anybody he's played up through this point. And I want to see what he can do against a team like Wake Forest, a team that is probably playing above their expectations, a team that has been good, but probably shouldn't have been as good as they were this year. So like I said, you can make a statement if you're Kamario Taylor tonight, and you can really show that you've made some solid improvement in these 2 weeks that you've had to practice leading up to this game. Because that is one of the things that I do think he needed to improve upon. I thought he needed to improve a little bit as a passer. Now, look, 2 weeks isn't going to make a huge difference, but it can make some. I mean, it can make some difference. And the other question that we have, I just saw the title for Thunder and Lightning this morning is Anthony Evans going to be a Bulldog or something like that. I look at, there's a lot of smoke around him possibly transferring, looking for money. I don't know. Maybe they get him, maybe they don't. Anthony Evans, they really need to try to keep him if at all possible. He has some drops issues. There's no question about that. But he's got to. They got to keep him. They don't want to lose a receiver. They just don't want to do that. So, I think Mississippi State can win. I want to predict them to win. I think it's going to be a pretty high scoring game. I want to say Mississippi State wins 7-31. That's where I'm going to go. 37-31. Mississippi State ends up pulling this out. And we'll just kind of see what happens with the Bulldogs going into next year. There's reason to be excited. I mean, if you're a Bulldog fan, but you can be even more excited if the Bulldogs play well tonight and really have a chance to do something special going into next year. Like I said, look, the comparisons to 2014 are there. Mississippi State played and kind of snuck their way into the Liberty Bowl at the last minute in 2013 and Dak Prescott gets a lot of extra practice time, has just an amazing performance in the Liberty Bowl, and then his junior year just almost wins the Heisman Trophy and almost leads Mississippi State to a national championship. So, like I said, I mean, there is precedent for this. Now, will it happen again? I don't know. I'm not sure that Jeff Lebby's as good a coach as Dan Mullen, and I think that's one of the reasons why that Mississippi State was able to capitalize on that the way they did, because Dan Mullen is a very good coach. But we'll see. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the basketball team real quick. Very encouraged by the basketball team's play of late. They ended up killing Alabama State. We talked about that on the show earlier this week. So, like I said, that was encouraging, but obviously it was Alabama State. You've got the Bulldogs, if they're going to win and get back on track in SEC play, it really needs to start tomorrow when they take on Texas. Because if you look at their schedule here to start isn't just incredibly daunting. You've got Texas, who is 9-4, but it is on the road, so that's going to be an issue. You've got Oklahoma, who is 10-3, but that one's at home. And then you got Kentucky, who under Mark Pope, I think that's the name of the coach that is at Kentucky now, who hasn't just been just great since he's gotten there. So you've got some opportunities to win. Now, you do have to go to Kentucky, but then it becomes difficult because then you got Alabama coming. But in the month of January, of the teams that are ranked in SEC, the teams they're playing in January, the only two teams that are currently ranked in SEC right now are Alabama and Vanderbilt. And that's it. Everybody else is unranked. So, look, if they could pull off, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They got 9 games in January. If you could win 6 of them, then you're in pretty good shape going forward into the rest of SEC play. If you're 6-3 at the halfway point and do another 6-3, then you're probably going to make it into the NCAA tournament. Now, obviously, in February, I'm pretty certain it's going to get a little bit more difficult. Well, actually, it's not that much more difficult. Currently, only 3 teams in the SEC are ranked that they play. Like I said, the SEC just isn't quite as good as it has been the last couple of years. But so you have some opportunities. I mean, that's kind of the thing. I think they can get back into the NCAA tournament talk, but they're going to have to avoid what they've done so far. They're going to have to avoid these really bad games where they just don't play well. And they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do up front. If they can't figure out who's going to be their best contributors in the front court, it's going to be really difficult. You can make an arguable case that Mississippi State has the best backcourt in the SEC. The only problem is they don't have a true point guard. But Jaden Epps and Josh Hubbard, the two of them combined are averaging like nearly 35 points a game. Now, the issue is, like I said, you don't have a true point guard who can distribute the ball and get other people involved in the scoring as well. So that's not really their strength, their specialty. But they are 2 amazing backcourt pieces, and unfortunately, they just don't have anything to go with them up front right now. So, look, I think this team can rebound, but if they're going to do it, they need to get off to a strong start. You've got 2 winnable games against Texas and against Oklahoma. You need to win those games before you play Kentucky on the road and then take on Alabama at home, because Mississippi State has never beaten Alabama ever since what's-his-name took over as the coach at Alabama. So you got to win there. Now, the women's side, they got started last night, and they end up beating Auburn pretty convincingly, about 20 points. I think 75-53 or something like that. I don't remember what the score was. Let me look it up real quick. Yeah, 75-53. This was encouraging. The one thing I've been saying about the women's team is I don't really know what to expect from them once they got to SEC play, because their strength of schedule was so incredibly soft. And this looks good. I mean, look, Auburn is 9-4. So, I mean, I don't know how good they are, but I was somewhat concerned that as soon as SEC play started, that it would just go all downhill, because they hadn't played anybody good at that point, and they weren't going to have much of a chance against anybody, because I was afraid that we had created some paper tigers. But this is the first encouraging sign. Not only did they win, they just really kind of kicked their butts. So that's the really encouraging part about this. And I'm hoping that maybe this strategy of let's just give ourselves a new team, a team with a lot of new faces. Let's not make it too difficult on ourselves here in the non-conference portion of the schedule. And then we can build some confidence and just kind of rip through the SEC play. Maybe that's going to happen. I don't know. Look, it's only one game in the SEC play, but it was a really good one, and that's what you want to see. So, like I said, we'll just kind of see if they can build upon that. But that was a very encouraging start for the women's team. Going into SEC play and beating an SEC opponent by 22 points, like I said, that's really encouraging. I don't know if they're going to be able to keep it up, but it was encouraging to see, at least for now. So, all right, let's talk about the college football playoff. It took place on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Here's the thing I want to talk about. We do have to start asking ourselves in the college football playoff world if the whole idea about giving the top 4 teams a bye into the quarterfinal round of the college football playoff, if that's more of a detriment than it is a positive. Because we only have 2 rounds, so it's hard to say definitively that this is the case. And look, there's a very decent possibility they end up going to 16 teams next year. And if they go to 16 teams next year, then this is a moot point. But as of right now, we've had 2 years of the college football playoff where the top 4 seeds get automatic buys, and so far those teams are combined 1-7. Now the one looked really good. Indiana just absolutely smacked Alabama yesterday. That was I kind of expected Indiana to win. I know there's a lot of people who were kind of just got like starstruck and saw the name Alabama, like, oh, Alabama got right against Oklahoma, so they're obviously going to get right and take it to Indiana. And no, that did not happen at all. Indiana just absolutely pounded Alabama. But in the 2 years that we've had the college football playoff, the 8 teams that have had buys into the second round are now 1-7. And we have to ask ourselves, is the problem, are we putting them what should be an advantage, giving the extra rest? Is it putting them at a huge disadvantage because they've been off for so long, and the teams that they're playing coming into these games are getting a chance to knock their rust off in their previous game? Look, in the case of Oregon and Ole Miss, those 2 teams basically just got scrimmages. It really benefited them. They just got scrimmage games is what they got. That's basically what they were doing when they were playing Tulane and against James Madison. Yeah, I know James Madison ended up putting like 37 points on the board, but most of those points came in garbage time when Oregon had pretty much stopped trying. This is a question that needs to be asked and needs to be addressed. If we're giving what's supposed to be an advantage, having the week off and not having to play that first game, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say just because the way that they did the top 4 teams last year kind of throws this off. Boise State would not have been one of the top 4 teams had it not been for the rule that they had in place last year, that the top 4 conference champions got the automatic buys. And the same thing with Arizona State. They would not have been one of the top 4 teams in this year's playoff. So it's hard to say, and it's hard to kind of really put any type of quantifiable data to it, especially with such a small limited sample. But it doesn't look good that you have 8 opportunities for those teams, what should be good opportunities for them to get into the national semifinal, and only one team has been able to do it. And it may be one of the best teams that we've ever had in college football in Indiana, which is just shocking to say, but they are trending in that direction. If they can continue to do what they did against Alabama to the rest of the opponents, and I wouldn't put it past them, if they can continue to do that, we're going to have to start having conversations about if this is one of the best teams of all time. And because they looked really, really good against Indiana. Like I said, I will say, it should be fun next week to watch the semifinals. Ole Miss will take on Miami in the Fiesta Bowl. Oregon and Indiana would play in the Peach Bowl, I think is where they're going to be playing that one. So, like I said, it should be interesting. I'll talk more about that next week. But for now, I want to go ahead and move on to the Stranger Things finale because it aired New Year's Eve. And guys, I thought it was really, really good. I've got one small quibble, and we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But I thought it was really good. Having looked back on it, I did do an instant reaction thing on TikTok. And having had a little bit more time to think about it, they just did so many things very well. Look, the big fight, it was fine. I don't necessarily know that it was great. I think there were some really cool moments in it when 11 shows up to take on Vecna and to take on the Mind Flayer. I thought the way they introduced her, the way that they brought her into the scene was just really epic, and they did a really good job. I mean, they made her look like a superhero, which is the thing that she has been called, but the thing that she has also been struggling with throughout the course of this entire show is, am I a hero or am I a villain or am I a monster? And the way they bring her into that scene and that moment was really powerful, and it did a really good job of showing, no, she's not the monster, she's not the villain, she is a hero. And they gave her some real cool hero moments in that fight against Vecna at the very end of that part of the show. Like I said, I thought it was really good. The emotional beats they got right on this show. They got the emotional beats between Hopper and between 11 correct. They got Hopper, who is still just trying his best to hold on to her and protect her, despite the fact that if she's going to be what she's truly capable of, and if she's going to be everything that she can be, she has to put herself in harm's way, and he just hasn't been wanting to do it. So, like I said, I thought that was really good. Really enjoyed that part of it. The other emotional beats, look, probably the best emotional beat they had the entire show was when Vecna is kind of coughing and gagging for life after they've pulled those 12 children out of their goopy prison cells or whatever it is you want to call it. I don't really know what to call that. But after they pull them out, and he's not, we find out he's not completely dead yet. He's kind of gasping for life there. And we see Joyce walk up and she says, "You mess with the wrong effing family," and then just starts hammering at him with an axe to chop his head off. But while she is doing that, they are showing us scenes of all the hurt, all the pain, all the trauma that everybody that is in that room went through because of what Vecna and the Mind Flayer did to them. And it was just so gut wrenching to watch them go through this and to see this. And like you could just see the catharsis that everybody in that room was feeling, because they knew that the hell that they had been put through for the last 5 years is finally coming to an end. And now they can finally move on with their lives. And once she finally cuts his head off, that's it. That's over. And then we get basically an hour-long epilogue. But before we get to the hour-long epilogue, they're making their triumphant return back into Hawkins, but the military has set up and they are there. And this is my big quibble. Okay, this is my big quibble. Look, before I get to my big quibble, there are some people who are saying that what Mike was saying at the end of the show about 11, about how she wasn't actually there. It was Kali doing an illusion to make everybody think that she actually was. Guys, that is actually what happened. This is the thing I was thinking about when I was actually watching the show and watching it in real time. When she pulls Mike into her mind, she wouldn't be able to do that in that situation simply because of the fact that those speakers were going. She wouldn't have been able to do that because those speakers were going. And if she was actually there, then none of that can take place. So what Mike is saying there at the end of the show is correct. She got away. But my big quibble with this is after she disappears and after the Upside Down is basically done away with, the military has everybody else there and they have them captured. And then we just fast forward 18 months and we don't ever find out what happens to the military. Now, here's my problem with this. And I've had a lot of people never have voiced this. People have said, well, they obviously swept it under the rug. Here's the thing. I can't imagine this rogue military section led by Dr. K, now that they don't have the person that they have been searching for the entire time, are going to allow these people to live because they're witnesses to all the horrible things they did. And they are obviously perfectly okay with doing horrible, terrible things. Plus, these people also killed a whole bunch of military officers, soldiers, and I just don't know how they can just hand wave away the fact they were caught by the military once 11 is gone. And the person who was their best protector, 11, she's not there anymore to help them. This was just really kind of mind-blowing to me, and it was very much confusing to me. Like, they needed to give us something about what happened after that moment, because there's no logical reason for why there's just 18 months later going to school, graduating high school. Like, these people at best should have been sent like to some secret compound where they could never be heard from again because they knew too much. I mean, like I said, I'm just shocked that they did nothing to explain why they ended up the way they did. I'm just really shocked by it. I don't know how in the world they didn't explain that way. But beside that, I thought it was great. I thought it was great. Besides everything else that happened in the finale was absolutely spectacular. We get, like I said, basically an hour-long epilogue in which we get to spend time with these characters for the first time without them having to run for their lives, without them having to be fearing that someone is going to drag them off and take them to some place that they don't want to be taken to and tortured. We finally get some time to spend with these people, with these characters that we love, and it's just an absolutely wonderful moment. To me, one of the best highlights of it isn't with the main kids, the younger kids. It's with the older ones, the ones who are now high school graduates, in college, or possibly pursuing other things outside of college. When you got Steve, Jonathan, Nancy, and Robin up on the roof of the Squawk, and they're sitting there talking with each other, and they've kind of gone their separate ways, and they're now having this discussion about, okay, well, in once a month we're going to meet up at Robin's weird uncle's weird uncle's house and meet in his basement and have a good time. This is the thing that I think they got done the best, because every single person who has been through life and has gone through this same stuff, you have those dear friends, those close friends you had when you were in high school, and you so desperately want to keep those relationships intact when you have to all start going separate ways. And what ends up happening is you have all the best intentions in the world, but people start leading their own lives and other things start happening. You start meeting other people and you meet new friends. And this, once a month meeting is, maybe they do it for once or twice, but then it's going to be other things are going to get in the way. It becomes once every 2 or 3 months, then it becomes once every 6 months or once a year. And this is what happens. And this is the part that I think just was so good. This entire show is really about kids growing up. It's just having to grow up in really difficult ways. But that's what this is about. And this is the stage of life that these people are in. They're at a stage of life where they have to start figuring out who they are outside of what they've been in high school and outside of these wonderful friends they've had. And despite the fact that they are as close as they can be, life will just take them in opposite directions, and it will make it difficult for them to stay in touch. I mean, most of us just don't stay in touch that often with the people that we were really, really close friends with in high school. It's just the way that life works. I mean, maybe we're friends with them on Facebook, or we follow them on Twitter or Instagram or whatever it may be. But that strong bond that most of us had with those people when we were in high school, they start to dissipate and they start to go away because life gets in the way of those things. And like I said, they really captured that moment really well with those people. I thought ending the show with the Dungeons and Dragons game, with Mike telling the stories that he does, I thought that worked incredibly well. And then with the Holly and her friends coming down and taking over, I thought that was just really cool as well, because they're the new blood and they're the ones that are picking up where our original heroes left off. And if they want to do a spinoff, there they are. You got now delightful Derek and Holly, and I don't remember the other kids' names, but that would be it seems like it would be just an absolute natural thing to do. So, like I said, I was really impressed by it. I loved the Stranger Things finale. I thought this season was probably the weakest season of the 5. We didn't get as much. One of the things that made Stranger Things so good is you got the rest of Hawkins just kind of going about life, and you got these kids having to figure out, how to make things appear normal and still live their lives in a normal fashion while the end of the world was possibly coming upon them. And that's the one thing we don't get in this season. There's just so much to wrap up and there's so much going on. We lose that part of it. They've been doing it for so long, like they actually got to the point where they're kind of actually good at it and they kind of know what they're doing. And that's the one thing that the first 4 seasons didn't have. And I think that made it really good is, they were all just kind of figuring this stuff out as they went along in those first 4 seasons. And that's what I think made it so good at times. But like I said, I thought, even though there were some hits and misses and some bumps along the way this season, I thought it was overall really good. And the finale, I thought, really nailed it. I thought they did a really good job of getting us to the end of this thing. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Stranger Things, and I'd love to hear what you think. So, guys, appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate you coming and checking out the show. Next week, we will talk the Mayo Bowl, the results of it. We will also talk about how the basketball team does, and we'll start looking at, since 2025 is now in the books, I'll give you my top 10 TV shows for this past year, and my top 10 movies for this past year next week as well. So appreciate you guys coming, and we'll talk to you next time.